The Caribbean sun blazed mercilessly over Port Royal's bustling harbour as Captain Marcus Blackwood supervised the loading of his ship, the Sea Serpent. 20 years of piracy had weathered his face like driftwood, but his steel-grey eyes remained sharp as a cutlass. The morning's raid on a Spanish merchant vessel had yielded promising cargo, barrels of rum, chests of silver, and crates marked with mysterious symbols. "Cap 'em!" shouted Tommy One-Eye McGillicuddy, the ship's quartermaster, as he rolled a particularly heavy barrel across the deck. "This one's sealed tighter than a mermaid's purse. Want me to crack her open?" Blackwood nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. The Sea Serpent was a formidable brigantine, her black sails bearing the crew's emblem, a serpent coiled around an anchor. She'd been home to 37 souls for the past 5 years, each one bound by the pirate's code and loyalty forged in battle. Tommy raised his crowbar, but before he could strike, a muffled sound emerged from within the barrel, a sound that made every pirate freeze. It was unmistakably human. "Stand back, lads," Blackwood commanded, drawing his dagger. Pirates gathered in a circle as their captain carefully pried at the barrel's lid. The wood groaned in protest before finally giving way with a sharp crack. What emerged was not treasure, but terror incarnate. A young woman, perhaps 17, with tangled auburn hair and emerald eyes wide with fear. Her dress, once fine silk, was now torn and stained. She blinked against the sudden sunlight, her pale hands trembling as she gripped the barrel's edge. "Sweet Neptune's beard," whispered Finn O'Malley, the ship's cook. "It's a lass." The girl's eyes darted frantically between the scarred faces surrounding her, taking in the cutlasses, pistols, and black flags. When her gaze met Blackwood's, she tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. "Please, don't hurt me." "Easy there, miss," Blackwood said, his voice surprisingly gentle. He offered his hand, but she recoiled. "We're not going to harm you, but I need to know, how did you come to be in that barrel?" The girl's lower lip quivered. My father. He said I was worth more as cargo than as a daughter." Her voice broke. "He sold me for a single silver coin to men who promised to take me far away. They drugged me, and when I woke up..." She gestured helplessly at the barrel. A collective growl of anger rippled through the crew. Pirates they might be, but they lived by a code, and selling one's own blood was the lowest form of treachery. "What's your name, lass?" asked Sarah Scarlett Morrison, the ship's navigator and one of only 3 women in the crew. "Elara," the girl whispered. "Elara Whitmore." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "Whitmore, as in Lord Edmund Whitmore of Jamaica?" Elara nodded miserably. He lost everything gambling. Said I was his last valuable asset." Fresh tears streamed down her cheeks. "He told the buyers I was a virgin worth a fortune in the slave markets of Tortuga." The crew's anger intensified. Big Jim Hawthorne, the ship's gunner, spat over the rail. "Scurvy dog ain't fit to call himself a father." "Aye," agreed Patches Mackenzie, the ship's doctor. "Any man who'd sell his own daughter deserves to feed the sharks." Blackwood studied Elara carefully. Despite her fear and dishevelled appearance, there was something in her eyes, a spark of defiance that hadn't been extinguished. "Can you work, Miss Whitmore? Because on this ship, everyone earns their keep." Elara straightened slightly. "I can read and write in 4 languages. I know mathematics, navigation theory, and..." She hesitated. "I can fight with a sword. My father hired a master-at-arms before he lost his fortune." Scarlett raised an eyebrow. "Navigation theory? Interesting. What do you know about celestial positioning?" "I can plot a course using the stars," Elara replied, her voice growing stronger. "I studied under Master Cornelius before Father dismissed him." Blackwood exchanged glances with his crew. "A navigator with noble education could be invaluable. Very well, you'll work under Scarlett in the chart room, but understand this." His voice hardened. "This is a pirate ship. We raid, we fight, and sometimes we kill. If you can't stomach that life, we'll put you ashore at the next port." Elara looked around at the faces surrounding her, rough, scarred, but not unkind. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. "I have nowhere else to go. And after what my father did," her green eyes flashed with newfound determination, "I think I can stomach more than you might expect." Over the following weeks, Elara proved herself remarkably adaptable. She worked alongside Scarlett, learning the practical applications of navigation while sharing her theoretical knowledge. The crew, initially skeptical, began to warm to her quick wit and willingness to work. "She's got sea legs faster than most," observed Tommy one evening as they watched Elara help Finn prepare dinner. "And she don't complain about the hard work." But it was during their first real test that Elara truly proved her worth. The sea serpent had been pursuing a Spanish galleon for 2 days when they found themselves caught in a sudden squall. The storm struck with vicious intensity, turning the sea into a churning cauldron of foam and fury. "All hands on deck!" Blackwood roared over the howling wind. "Secure the rigging!" Elara emerged from below, her hair whipping in the gale. Without hesitation, she grabbed a rope and began helping to secure the mainsail. A massive wave crashed over the bow, sending her sliding across the deck toward the rail. "Elara!" Scarlett screamed, but the girl caught herself on the rigging, hauled herself upright, and continued working. When a loose block threatened to brain Tommy, she tackled him out of the way, taking a nasty gash on her arm in the process. "That's some courage, lass!" Big Jim shouted approvingly. The storm raged for 6 hours. When it finally passed, the crew found themselves battered but intact, and with a new respect for their unexpected passenger. Elara sat on a coil of rope, patches bandaging her wounded arm, her dress torn but her spirit unbroken. "You fought like a true pirate today," Blackwood told her. "The crew's voted. If you want it, you're one of us now." Elara looked up at him, then around at the faces of the crew. Her crew. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you get a share of the treasure, a voice in our decisions, and the protection of every soul aboard this ship," Scarlett explained. "But it also means you're bound by the code. Betray the crew, and you'll answer to the cat o' nine tails." "And if I accept?" Blackwood smiled grimly. "Then you'll need a proper pirate name. Elara Whitmore died in that barrel. Who do you want to be now?" The girl considered for a moment, watching the sun break through the dissipating storm clouds. "Elara Stormheart," she said finally, "because I've weathered the worst storm of my life and come out stronger." The crew cheered, and Finn produced a bottle of rum for the christening. As the amber liquid burned down her throat, Elara felt the last chains of her old life falling away. She was no longer the unwanted daughter of a gambling lord. She was a pirate of the Caribbean, with a family who'd chosen her just as she'd chosen them. But their celebration was short-lived. As the sea serpent limped toward a hidden cove for repairs, Scarlett spotted sails on the horizon. 3 ships, she announced grimly, flying Royal Navy colors. Blackwood cursed. "They're hunting us. Someone must have talked in Port Royal." "Captain," Tommy said quietly, "there's something else. I recognize the lead ship. It's the HMS Retribution, Admiral Whitmore's flagship." Elara's blood ran cold. "My father commands a ship." "Your father is Admiral Edmund Whitmore," Blackwood said slowly, "one of the most ruthless pirate hunters in the Caribbean. He's been after me for 3 years. The terrible truth hit Elara like a physical blow. Her father hadn't just sold her. He'd used her as bait. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew you'd find me. This was all a trap." The crew stared at her in stunned silence as the implications sank in. They'd rescued her, welcomed her, made her family, and unknowingly sailed straight into Admiral Whitmore's web. "What do we do, Captain?" asked Big Jim. Blackwood's jaw tightened as he watched the Navy ships closing in. "We run, and we pray that Miss Stormheart here is worth the fight that's coming." As the sea serpent changed course, racing toward the treacherous reefs that might offer sanctuary, Elara stood at the stern, watching her father's ship pursue them. The man who'd sold her for a silver coin now commanded 3 warships in his hunt for the pirates who'd shown her more kindness than he ever had. The wind picked up, filling their sails, but the Navy ships were gaining. Soon there would be nowhere left to run, and Elara would have to choose between the father who'd betrayed her and the pirates who'd become her family. The chase had begun, and the Caribbean would run red with blood before it ended. The sea serpent cut through the azure waters like a blade, her crew working with desperate efficiency as 3 Royal Navy warships closed the distance. Captain Blackwood stood at the helm, his weathered hands steady on the wheel despite the chaos erupting around him. "Scarlet!" he barked. "How close to Devil's Teeth?" "2 leagues, Captain," the navigator called back, her spyglass trained on the jagged rocks ahead. "But the tide's wrong. We'll be sitting ducks if we try to thread the needle." Elara, now Stormheart, stood beside the mainmast, her mind racing. She'd studied these waters in her father's charts, back when she'd believed he was a respectable merchant captain rather than a pirate-hunting admiral. "There's another way," she called out. "The Serpent's Back, a submerged reef that runs parallel to Devil's Teeth. If we can draw them over it." "The water's too deep," Tommy protested. "Those warships won't run aground." "Not the warships," Elara said, her green eyes blazing with newfound cunning. "But their longboats will, and without boats they can't board us even if they catch us." Blackwood's grin was sharp as a cutlass. "Spoken like a true pirate. Do it." The sea serpent altered course, heading straight for the treacherous waters between 2 coral formations. Behind them, the HMS Retribution and her escorts followed relentlessly, their superior firepower and numbers making flight the only option. "Range, Big Jim?" Blackwood called to his gunner. "Too far for our guns, Captain, but their bow chasers will reach us in 10 minutes. As if summoned by his words, a cannonball whistled overhead, splashing harmlessly into the sea 50 yards to starboard. Admiral Whitmore was testing the range, and his next shots would be more accurate. "All hands, prepare for battle," Blackwood roared. "But remember, we're not trying to win, just survive." The crew sprang into action with practiced precision. Cannons were loaded, cutlasses sharpened, and pistols primed. Elara found herself swept along in the preparation, her noble upbringing forgotten, as Patches thrust a boarding axe into her hands. "Know how to use this, lass?" "I'm about to learn," she replied grimly. Another cannonball struck closer, sending spray across the deck. The Retribution was gaining steadily, her superior size and fresh crew giving her the advantage in this deadly race. "There!" Scarlet pointed ahead. "The reef." The water ahead looked deceptively calm, but Elara knew that just beneath the surface lay razor-sharp coral that could gut a ship's hull like a fish. The sea serpent would have to navigate by memory and instinct, threading between hidden obstacles while under fire. "Hard to port!" Blackwood commanded, spinning the wheel. The ship responded beautifully, her sleek hull cutting through the water as the first line of coral passed safely beneath them. Behind them, the lead Navy ship, a massive frigate called HMS Vengeance, followed without hesitation. Her captain clearly trusted his charts and the depth of his keel. "Now!" Elara shouted. Blackwood spun the wheel again, bringing them around a submerged coral head that rose to within 3 feet of the surface. The sea serpent cleared it easily, but the Vengeance... The grinding, splintering crash echoed across the water as the frigate's hull scraped along the coral. She didn't sink, her construction was too solid for that, but her speed dropped dramatically as water poured through the gash in her hull. "One down!" cheered the crew, but their celebration was premature. The Retribution and the third ship, HMS Intrepid, had learned from their companion's mistake. They swung wide, avoiding the reef but maintaining their pursuit. "They're still coming," Tommy observed grimly. "Aye, but now the odds are better," Blackwood replied. 2 ships we might handle. 3 would have been suicide. The chase continued for another hour, the Navy ships slowly closing the gap. When they finally cleared the reef system, the Retribution was close enough that Elara could see figures on her quarterdeck through Scarlet's spyglass. "There," she whispered, focusing on a tall figure in an admiral's uniform. "That's him, that's my father." Even at this distance, Admiral Edmund Whitmore cut an imposing figure. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing rigid with military precision. He stood at the bow of his flagship like an avenging angel, his own spyglass trained on the sea serpent. "He's signaling," Scarlet reported. "Wants to parley." "Like hell," Blackwood snarled. "The only thing that bastard wants to discuss is our surrender." but Elara stepped forward. "Let me talk to him." "Absolutely not. Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time, "he's my father. Maybe I can buy us time or learn something useful." The captain studied her face, seeing the determination there. 5 minutes. But if this goes wrong— "It won't," Elara promised, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The ships drew alongside each other, close enough for conversation, but far enough apart to avoid boarding. Admiral Whitmore stood at his rail, his cold blue eyes fixed on his daughter. "Elara," he called across the water, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "You look different." "I am different," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'm no longer the commodity you sold for a silver coin." A flicker of something, regret, anger, crossed the Admiral's weathered face. "You don't understand the position I was in, the debts, the pressure from the crown." "I understand perfectly," Elara shot back. "You chose your reputation over your daughter. You chose your career over your blood. I chose to save your life." Whitmore's composure cracked slightly. "Do you think I wanted to sell you? The creditors were coming, Elara. They would have taken everything, including you. At least this way, I could ensure you ended up somewhere manageable." "Manageable?" Elara's laugh was bitter. "You mean where you could use me as bait for Captain Blackwood?" The Admiral's silence was answer enough. "You planned this," she continued, her voice rising. "You knew these pirates would rescue me. You counted on their honor, something you've clearly forgotten." "Honor?" Whitmore's voice turned harsh. "These are criminals, Elara. Murderers and thieves. Whatever kindness they've shown you is just another form of manipulation." "No," Elara said firmly. "They've shown me what family really means. They've given me a choice, something you never did." "Then choose now," the Admiral commanded. "Come aboard my ship, and I'll see you safely to England. Refuse, and I'll sink that pirate scow with you on it." The crew of the Sea Serpent tensed, hands moving to weapons. But Elara stood straighter, her chin raised defiantly. "I've already chosen," she declared. "My name is Elara Stormheart, and I sail with Captain Blackwood. If you want to sink us, Admiral, you'll have to murder your own daughter to do it." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the gap between ships. Then Admiral Whitmore's face hardened into a mask of cold resolve. "So be it," he said quietly. "You've made your choice, and I've made mine." He turned to his crew. "All ships, prepare for battle. No quarter given." "No quarter asked," Blackwood replied grimly. The parley was over. The Retribution and Intrepid began to maneuver for attack positions, their gun ports opening like hungry mouths. The Sea Serpent was outnumbered and outgunned, but her crew was ready to fight. "Battle stations," Blackwood roared. "Today we show these Navy dogs what pirates are made of." The first broadside came from the Intrepid, her guns speaking in a thunderous voice that shook the sea itself. Most of the shots went wide, but 2 cannonballs punched through the Sea Serpent's hull above the waterline. "Return fire," Big Jim commanded, and the pirate ship's guns answered with their own deadly song. The battle was joined in earnest now, smoke and flame wreathing the ships as they pounded each other with iron and lead. The Sea Serpent was faster and more maneuverable, but the Navy ships had more guns and thicker hulls. Elara found herself in the thick of the fighting, helping to reload cannons and tend to the wounded. A splinter from an exploding mast caught her cheek, drawing blood, but she barely noticed. This was her family, her crew, and she would fight for them with everything she had. "Elara," Scarlet called out, "the Retribution's trying to ram us." Indeed, Admiral Whitmore's flagship was bearing down on them, her reinforced bow aimed at the Sea Serpent's vulnerable side. If she struck, the pirate ship would be split in 2. "Hard to starboard," Blackwood commanded, but it was too late. The ships were too close, the Retribution too fast. That's when Elara made her choice. Racing to the stern, she grabbed a grappling hook and rope. As the Retribution swept past, missing them by mere feet, she hurled the hook with all her strength. It caught on the Navy ship's rail, and before anyone could stop her, Elara swung across the gap between ships. She landed hard on the Retribution's deck, rolling to absorb the impact. Navy sailors surrounded her immediately, but she was already moving, her boarding axe cutting a path toward the ship's wheel. "Stop her!" Admiral Whitmore shouted, but his daughter was faster. Elara reached the helm and brought her axe down on the wheel's spokes, splintering the wood and jamming the mechanism. The Retribution began to turn uncontrollably, her ram attack ruined. "Elara, get back here!" Blackwood roared from the sea serpent, but she was surrounded now, cutlasses and pistols pointed at her from every direction. Admiral Whitmore approached slowly, his own sword drawn. "Clever," he admitted, "but futile. You've only delayed the inevitable." "Have I?" Elara smiled grimly. "Look around, father." The Admiral glanced up to see the sea serpent positioning herself for a devastating broadside against his now helpless ship. With the wheel jammed, the Retribution couldn't maneuver to avoid the attack. "One word from me," Elara continued, "and Captain Blackwood will send this ship to the bottom, with both of us on it." "You're bluffing." "Am I? You taught me to play cards, remember? You should know I never bluff with a winning hand." Father and daughter faced each other across the blood-stained deck, the fate of both ships hanging in the balance. Around them, the battle continued to rage, but this moment belonged to them alone. "What do you want?" Whitmore asked finally. "Safe passage for the Sea Serpent and her crew. Your word as an officer and a gentleman, if you still remember what those words mean." The Admiral's jaw worked silently. His career, his reputation, everything he'd built his life on demanded that he refuse. But looking into his daughter's eyes, he saw something he'd thought lost forever. The fierce spirit that had reminded him so much of her mother. "You have my word," he said quietly. "But Elara, this isn't over. The Crown will send other ships, other hunters. You can't run forever." "Maybe not," she replied. "But I can run today, and tomorrow I'll face whatever comes with my family beside me." She backed toward the rail, her axe still ready. "Tell them I died in the battle," she said. "It'll be easier for everyone that way." Elara, but she was already gone, diving over the side into the churning sea. Strong hands pulled her from the water as the sea serpent drew alongside, her crew, her family, welcoming her home. As the pirate ship sailed away into the setting sun, Admiral Whitmore stood at his damaged rail, watching his daughter disappear into legend. He'd lost her twice now, once to his own greed and once to his duty. But perhaps, in losing her, he'd finally found something worth more than silver or reputation. The sea serpent vanished into the Caribbean twilight, carrying with her a crew of rogues and a girl who'd chosen freedom over blood, adventure over safety, and family over everything else. Elara Stormheart was truly born that day, forged in battle and tempered by choice. And somewhere in the vast blue expanse of the Caribbean, her story was just beginning. The silver coin that had bought her freedom was nothing compared to the treasure she'd found among the pirates. A place where she belonged, a family who'd chosen her, and the endless horizon of possibility that stretched before them all.